play some film.
The title of the Wilkin Series this year is Journalism and Democracy, the Ethical Responsibility of the State. As a journalist, I am extremely passionate about this topic. I worked in TV for 15 years and as a print journalist for 6 years. I've been teaching journalism since 2009. Over that time, there have been many changes in our industry, but the contribution of the free press that it makes to democracy never changes. It is crucial for a functioning democracy. The Rock the Lock event that you see out there in the atrium started in 2016. This is our third presidential Rock the Lock. So hopefully if you haven't had a chance to vote, you get a chance to vote later. I'm extremely excited and honored to have Colleen Marshall from NBC4 Columbus here with us today. I worked with Colleen early in my career. And I learned a lot just by watching her and listening to her. I mean, she's the one that taught me you don't put I behind the names because they're independent. They don't need a designation. So I remember that, and I enjoyed her humor as well while we were there. So I could read you all of her accomplishments, but that would take up too much time, her time, and you have it all there in your programs. There's also a QR code there that will take you to her About page on NBC4 and tell you all of the wonderful awards she's won. I think probably among her accomplishments, I don't want to speak for her, but I think one to note would be the 4 Emmys she won for the health program, I Want to Go Home. A Journey Through Alzheimer's documented her mother's decade-long struggle with the disease. But she also hosts The Spectrum on Channel 4 every week, political show. So I'm going to turn it over here to her. Welcome, Colleen.
Thank you. Thank you. I was really intrigued when Amy said that she had this program, Journalism and Democracy, because I've been thinking an awful lot about it during this election year. I don't know if you've been paying attention to what's going on at the Washington Post this week. You know, the Post has a slogan, democracy dies in the dark. I am a reporter because of the Washington Post. I was a Watergate freak in high school. I was one of the weirdos who I actually convinced my mother I had to stay home one day because there was important testimony in the Watergate hearing. And because she wouldn't lie, she wrote out an excuse that I had to take in the next day that said, "Excuse Colleen for being absent. There was important testimony in the Watergate hearing." Because I was fascinated by these two reporters who essentially, by speaking truth to power, by uncovering a cover-up, toppled an administration, but they did it for the good of democracy. And I already loved to write. I was already the editor of the school paper, and that cemented for me that I wanted to be a journalist. And so Washington Post has always been probably my favorite newspaper, and now I subscribe to it online. But what's been going on the last week is, since 1976, the Washington Post has endorsed in the presidential election, starting with Jimmy Carter back in '76 when I was in college. And they have done it thoughtfully and carefully. They have a brilliant editorial staff, and they were prepared to endorse this year Kamala Harris. They had the editorial written, they had it ready to publish, and the owner, Jeff Bezos, called the editors together, called the managers to his estate in Florida, and told them there would be no presidential endorsement this year. Well, you can imagine what that did to a staff of journalists like the Washington Post. And it's important to remember the journalists, the writers, the photographers, the editors are separate from the editorial board, which is made up of some of their best columnists as well as managers, editors, completely different staff. But what happened when Jeff Bezos made the decision to pull the editorial and pull the endorsement and not allow it to go forward is the criticism started to fall on the journalists who had nothing to do with it and who are now covering this crisis within their own ranks. And almost immediately, people around the country, I think 200,000 so far, started canceling their subscriptions, including I saw some friends of mine because they're taking pictures of their cancellation notice and posting it to brag about the fact that they have. Now, I also thought it was horrible of them to pull the editorial, but canceling the subscription doesn't hurt Jeff Bezos. The Washington Post is a toy to him. It doesn't hurt him. It's going to hurt the people that we are counting on to continue speaking truth to power. That's who it's going to hurt. It's going to give them an excuse to lay people off, to cut back on maybe distribution, to cut back on advertising. And to me, that's the most unfortunate part of all of this. I do think they should have done the editorial. I think it's the responsibility, especially a leading paper like the Washington Post, to have a position, especially in a time when we're fighting over democracy. I think they did, it was a mistake, but I think the wrong people are going to pay for that mistake. And I'm also thinking a lot about journalism and our role in it because more than ever before, and I have been working in newsrooms 48 years. I started when I was in college. More than ever, there's this merging of not just reporting, but reporting and opinion and the delivery methods. You know, I have talked to people in your age group who say they get their news from The Daily Show. Well, The Daily Show has some great stuff on there. John Oliver does great stuff on Last Week Tonight, sometimes more in depth than we could ever do. He does amazing things, but we can't confuse it with journalism. And the other thing that's merging into the vernacular are the political ads. And I want to beat the drum that under federal law now, an elections commission does not have the power to make an ad be truthful. So they have given license to politicians to tell lies. And that makes our job harder because people hear the lies or hear the political spin, and to them, that becomes fact. And too many people are looking for a narrative that supports the position they already have. All they want to hear is someone telling them, you've got it right. So one of the things we've tried to do this year, we always try to do debates, and I'm going to be showing you a few things this morning from the Senate race here in Ohio. The presidential race here in Ohio is over. Donald Trump will carry Ohio. But the Senate race, despite the Republican surge and the right-leaning nature of Ohio right now, which it wasn't always right-leaning, it used to be a purple state, it changes messaging and it changes the obligation of candidates to do debates. So, of course, we wanted to do the Senate debate. We did the Senate primary debate. But Bernie Moreno would not debate this year. And he doesn't have to, because he thinks all he has to do is be a Republican right under Donald Trump on the ballot. And that may be true. He may carry this state without debate. He also would not come in and sit down for an in-depth interview, something Sherrod Brown did. But what we finally did get him to agree to is to let us follow him on the campaign trail for a couple of days. So a producer, a photographer, and I followed each of the candidates, Sherrod Brown and Bernie Moreno, and we did in-depth. We put it on the air. It was 5 or 6 minutes long for each piece. I'm going to show you just a few clips, starting with Sherrod Brown, and then we're going to play Bernie Moreno, and I want to see if you pick up on some of what I picked up on. So the first one is Sherrod, and this is just part of what we ran.
Bernie Moreno, 100% pro, his words, 100% pro-life, no exceptions for rape, no exception for incest, no exception for the life of the mother. Bernie Moreno, I fight for the dignity of work. He's cheated his workers out of back pay and fined by a court of law, $400,000. It's clear whose side he's on.
Brown built his 49-year political career on fighting for what he calls the dignity of work.
Sherrod has always worked for working families. There's many women in the auto industry, and when he stood for the auto industry, he stands for women too. So we're here as auto workers to let him know that he always had our back and we have his.
This is a launch rally in Cleveland for Women for Sherrod Brown. He lends an ear to business owners dealing with the skills gap.
Talking about the skills gap is the most important thing. It's the biggest drag on my company on being able to grow, is being able to find qualified workers.
To an OBGYN living with the fallout of the end of Roe v. Wade.
And dogs has been a disaster for everything that's happened. So I appreciate your attitude about that.
Outrageous. They don't care.
And they just don't care.
They don't care what others think. They tried to cheat. They tried to stop it. They're trying to beat it again. They're trying to overturn it. It's just outrageous. It's like this belief in democracy. They really don't. They believe in rich guys controlling it.
How important are the women to the Sherrod Brown campaign?
They are the spine, they are the soul, they are the ground under every march. Which is why I'm standing shoulder to shoulder with your senator, Sherrod Brown.
Connie Schultz is the most important woman in the Brown camp. His Pulitzer Prize-winning wife, who paused her career this year to support his.
So many women around my age and older who are becoming politically active for the first time in their lives.
They got something we don't have. They got special interests. I got something they don't have. I have you.
More than ever before, Ohio leans Republican. Conservative voters say they are fed up with the Biden for supporting policies that they say resulted in high inflation and open borders. Marino supporters blame Brown too.
My daughters are legal aliens adopted from China. You are a legal alien. My grandparents came here through Ellis Island. Republicans are for immigration, but we want to keep the front door and the back door locked and welcome in everybody who comes in the right way. Amen.
Welcome people to America.
Thank you.
Because I want some change. It's time for change.
Kelly Thomas is a Republican Air Force veteran who wants Sherrod Brown out of office.
I want somebody in there that's not going to tuck their tail under and turn coat to the left wing.
GOP ads attack Brown where he is most vulnerable, what they call a liberal voting record, especially on gay rights, climate change, and immigration.
Spending our tax dollars, inviting illegals to storm our borders.
Now, in what might be the tightest race of his political career, Brown is counting on help from independent voters and lifelong Republicans like Whitlow Wyatt, who says he will never be a MAGA Republican.
No, I'm a registered Republican, have been for years and years, but I've long been an admirer of Senator Brown for his character and his support for the common people. I'm also a Teamster, and we underwent a severe pension crisis beginning in about 2013. And he was instrumental in helping save our pensions.
So what we saw on the road with Brown is the Democrat messaging, his messaging, being amplified. Because what's important to Democrats, that's okay. What's important to Democrats this year is abortion. A lot of strategists off the record have said to me, Democrat strategists, they wish that abortion was actually on the ballot this year for Sherrod Brown, because they put it on the ballot last year. And a lot of people in the Brown camp were saying we should have that on the ballot in the presidential election year, because as long as he's been a senator, he has never been on the ballot with a Republican-favored president at the top of the ticket. He ran in an off-presidential race last year. He ran when Obama ran, so he has been running when he hadn't faced a challenge at the top of the ticket. Now, Ohio is leaning to the right. Now the messaging is more difficult to get through to Republican voters like the man you saw at the end. Now, what I want you to see in this Bernie Marino tape is something unexpected happened. And if some of you I know are journalism students, I want you to pay attention, because our photographer did what he needed to do. It involves protesters. So let's take a look at that. He's running on the issues that Republicans value: closed borders.
How much do you want to spend taking care of illegals in this country next year? Zero? All right, we just saved $451 billion. All right, look at that.
Lowering inflation.
How many of you have been to the grocery store lately and you ask the cashier, did you add something by mistake? Because there's no way the groceries that I just bought could possibly be that much. Thank you so much.
He is for energy independence, against the Green New Deal, against what he calls indiscriminate military spending in foreign countries that hate us, and blames so much on the so-called mainstream media.
The same media that 3 months ago told us Kamala Harris was an imbecile is now telling us she's the second coming of Martin Luther King. Same media. Same media. You're not going to get the truth from them.
Messaging the Republican side of the divide welcomes.
And the Democrats are damaging this country so bad. They're doing so many things that we don't appreciate. They are doing things that is just not our morals and our standards. We need Trump in there again. He proved himself, and I think the Democrats have certainly proved themselves too.
In polls right now, we're either even, down 2, or down 4. We were down 5, 6, and 8. So now we're going to open a can of whoop-ass on it, and we'll see a big jump in the polls. But we're going to do it when people are paying attention.
He says people are starting to pay attention to his Defend America tour and his conservative message.
Yeah, these are the things you learn when you travel all over Ohio.
How many days are you on the road?
Oh, every day.
workers $400,000 after failing to pay overtime wages. With no time in office and no political record to attack, Marino's legal troubles are the centerpiece of Brown's anti-Bernie
Time and
ads.
again, Bernie Moreno was caught failing to properly pay workers the overtime they earned.
And his ads are basically all pejoratives against me. You know, Bernie's a bad guy, Bernie was a car dealer, Bernie cheated this or that. I'm not going to make this about personal attacks on him. I think people are sick and tired of the politics of personal destruction.
But ads about cheating workers out of wages Here it is. they earned resonate with workaday Ohioans.
I bless you with not shaking your hand and not countenancing what you've done to your workers. You've oppressed your workers, you've kept off their wages, and what's this I hear about destroying information a judge asked you to take? I'm very concerned, and that's why you're not going to come to Chillicothe, Ohio, if you've oppressed your workers, and come to us who support workers in this state.
We know he has cheated his workers. We, as the state of Ohio, must protect our employees and ensure that they are paid for the work that is done. We are so proud to be here with our fat cat, which is what Bernie Moreno is.
Okay, what I found interesting about that is they are all so certain that he destroyed records, that he cheated his workers. It's been a political message that has gotten through to voters around the state. Do you know where that happened? In Massachusetts. In Massachusetts. So when they realize that he is running, the Democrats, you have to start counter-programming, we'll call it, but they start looking for dirt on their opponents. And that's the thing that really stuck out about Moreno. He was sued multiple times by workers who say they were denied overtime pay. And then the Democrats go through the court records, and I read this ruling. The judge was furious with him because he and his employees did destroy records that they had a legal obligation to hold on to. When I asked him about that on the campaign trail, he said, well, the judge was just mad because he didn't want us to fight this case at all. So it was the judge who was at fault. The judge should have, the judge was just reacting and said these things because he was mad that Bernie Moreno was trying to stand up for his rights. Well, it's probably a ridiculous argument. If you read the ruling, you'll see the documents were gone. And the overtime claim, he ended up having to pay to that group of workers about $400,000, and there are more claims pending. Now, the question is this something that should be important to voters? To the voters you heard from, it's important. And it's important because they believe the messaging. And our job is to cut through the messaging and decide what's factual and what's important as a journalist for us to share with the public. And from each side, we get dirt. We get information. Sometimes it's from people within the Democratic Party, sometimes it's somebody within the Republican Party, or from one of the campaigns or the other, who give us information. I had 2 calls on the way up here about the same thing, from operatives, I'll say. Bernie Moreno, you might have seen the ads that I did not want to be part of, but became part of all across the state. Bernie Moreno, the statements that he makes to people who are his supporters are different than the statements he might be making when he knows there's a television camera in the room. So and not just Bernie Moreno, they're all like that. If you're talking to a sympathetic group of supporters, you might be saying things that you're not going to say in front of a camera. Well, at one of his fundraising events, an event where people pay money to take a picture with him and to see him, he made some comments about women and abortion, and especially aging women and whether or not they should care about abortion. What he did not know is that there was someone there recording everything he was saying, and that person sent it to me. So I get this tape. I get a phone call first on a weekend I have someone who wants to give you something. I'm not going to tell you who my sources are, but they described the tape and they said he stood in front of a bunch of people and said, women over 50, why do they care about abortion? They can't get pregnant. That, I thought that can't be true. He wouldn't be dumb enough to say something like that. No one would say that. So I get the tape, and sure enough, he's saying it. It's fuzzy from the middle of the room. It's taken from a cell phone. But I'm not going to run that until I verify from his staff that he said it. And what they said when I asked them about it was, well, it was a tongue-in-cheek joke. He was being sarcastic because he thinks that the Democrats are only single-issue voters. So now I aired it. It became part of a commercial for the Brown camp. I have no control over that. It's called fair use. They can cherry pick whatever they want out of a newscast. And then the firestorm started. So that weekend on our political show, we did a little bit about the fallout, and I'm going to show you that now. Marino was speaking to a supportive Republican audience at a town hall event in Warren County when he said many suburban women are solely focused on their ability to get an abortion, and for women over 50, it shouldn't be an issue at all. In the audience, someone recorded those comments on a cell phone, and I was given access to the recording. We were first to report it, touching off a week of backlash. Up first this morning, we want you to hear for yourself what Marino had to say.
There's a lot of single-issue voters. Sadly, by the way, there's a lot of suburban women. A lot of suburban women, listen, abortion's it. If I can't have an abortion in this country whenever I want, I will vote for anybody else. Okay, you're a little crazy, by the way. Especially for women that are like past 50 and think it's out there.
But Marino's comments went far beyond Ohio. Within hours of our story hitting the air, MSNBC's Rachel Maddow picked it up.
You know, unluckily for Bernie Moreno in Ohio, running against Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown, women in Ohio, even women over 50, apparently do still have the right to vote, even if he doesn't think they have a right to an opinion.
Within days of our story, the Washington Post, the New York Times, even the Daily Show weighed in.
Who can't get pregnant care about abortion. Only men who can't get pregnant are allowed to care about
it. A spokeswoman for Marino sent me a statement claiming the Senate candidate was making a tongue-in-cheek joke because Sherrod Brown and the left-wing media pretend that abortion is the only issue that matters to women. Now, this touched on one of my pet peeves, not just the backlash. But you saw Rachel Maddow sitting on a news set. MSNBC does it, Fox does it. Their opinion people sit on a set that looks exactly like a news set. They have graphics that look exactly like news graphics. They dress like anchors, but they are not journalists. They are opinion performers. They are, I don't want to say a pejorative because it is entertaining and they do a good job of what they do. Both Fox and MSNBC do this. They have bias, prejudiced opinion. But what's happened is the audience is having trouble distinguishing it because to them what Rachel Maddow says is as factual as what the audience at Fox believes Fox is. So it's all blended together. There's political spin, there is opinion TV, and then caught in this whirlwind are journalists who are trying to be fair and accurate and balanced and factual and trying so hard to just get the story out properly. And it is a challenge. And one of the things I wanted to mention that I forgot, when you saw Bernie Moreno going over to the protesters who were across the street, he wouldn't sit down for an interview. This is a good thing for young journalists to know. He did agree to let us follow him. I always had a mic on me when I got near him. And he would start talking to me. So those questions you saw, it wasn't a formal interview. He didn't agree to an interview. But he's got a camera in his face and he's talking to a television reporter, so he had to know we're recording it. But that's as close as I could get to getting a real in-depth interview with him. I just followed him everywhere and always had a mic on. And so I heard him say to his advisor, I'm going to go across the street and talk to them, the protesters. And the advisor said, do not do that. And he said, no, I'm gonna reason with them. I can talk to them. And she said, I'm telling you, please don't go over there. So I turned, my photographer that was a little bit away from me, and I walked over to him and I said, no matter where he goes, you stick within a foot of him, because he's gonna go confront those protesters. And that's how we got the minister refusing to shake his hand and basically saying, well, you heard what he said. You don't come here. We represent workers here. It was good TV. His handlers were freaking out. And now I understand after that, now this is what I'm trying to verify that I heard in the car on the way down here today. Business Insider had it over the weekend, but I haven't been able to verify it. We've been told he is now carrying a device that blocks people from recording him. A very expensive device, and they tell me they've got pictures of it. Now, these are people from the other side. And I said, tell me about this device. Where can I buy this device? How does it work? And they said, we have pictures of it in his hand. We know that he's trying to block people from recording him. I don't know if that's true. I'm going to try to figure it out when I go back to the station. They promised they were sending me the video that proves he's trying to block people from recording him. To the average person, I don't think people probably care that much about that he doesn't want to be recorded. Just from my perspective, it's good to know. Would it block our mics? Would it, how much power does this thing have? So we're going to try to find out. There's only one more piece of video that I want to show you, and I want to show you as we open this up to maybe talk, because I'm not going to tell you anything about this. Just take a look at it, and then I'm going to ask you what you think happened.
19 days out from the election, you've been labeled a racist, you've been called a sexist. How do you respond to that?
I am the least racist person you've ever met.
Okay, you see that one clip. What do you think? How do you think that all came about? Because it looks as if that was my entire conversation with Donald Trump that day. And there are people who thought that that's how that conversation started. I had a 10-minute interview with him. And this is another word of caution, because I keep pointing to you because I know you're working in a newsroom, or you've done work in a newsroom. A word of caution about what your own newsroom can do to you. I did a 10-minute interview with Donald Trump during the first Trump election in Delaware County. 10 minutes. We talked about policy, we talked about Hillary Clinton, we talked about the economy. We talked about a lot of issues. It was at the time, if some of you remember from that election, where there were commercials running almost nonstop with Donald Trump's voice, saying things that appeared to be racist and saying things that appeared to be sexist, including the tape that was the Access Hollywood tape. Leading up to that question, I said to him, all over Ohio, there are commercials running, and they make it sound as if you've said some horrible things. And then I said, you've been accused then of being a racist, of being a sexist. He got angry at that question, walked away. What you can't see here is my photographer was here, I was here. As he started to walk away, someone clamped their hand on the shoulder of the photographer. If you'd see the tape, you see his camera going up like this. They clamped their hand on my shoulder and to pull us away because they didn't want me trying to continue to follow him to get him to answer the question, which is, you know, that happens. But the point is, I had a 10-minute interview with him. I called the station. I said, okay, we've got this interview. This is what we have, and we start feeding it back because now we're going to stay for the rest of the rally. So we go to the live truck, we feed the interview back. Did anything happen? You know, what's a good soundbite? What happened? And I said, well, he got angry at the end of the interview. He walked away from me. He did? What did he say? How did that look? And I'm like, he was mad because I was asking about those commercials. Okay, now I go in to cover the rally. The people who work on our digital desk at work know that's gold for them because they're going to get a lot of hits on it. And they get measured for their metrics. How many hits did we get? How many views did we get? How long did they stay? Did they read the article? All of that is carefully calibrated. So that's, before I even got back to the station, that was pushed out. I start getting phone calls from people. What happened? Why was he so mad at you? I'm like, what? I mean, I'm covering something. What? It was everywhere. It was on Seth Meyers. It was, other TV stations picked it up. And the interview was pretty good. He said some things that he hadn't said before. That is all anybody cared about. And they cared about it because my own station pushed it out. Now, it was what they wanted it to be, it was clickbait. People tuned into it. So it's 8 years later, I still get questioned about that 3, 4 second, maybe 10-second tape. That's what people picked up on. And that's the cautionary tale I will give you to hopefully be prepared, because a misstep or a question that can be taken out of context can follow you for a very, very long time. So now I think we should open it up. If you have any questions, if you want to talk about anything that, not just politics, but journalism, it'd be great. Yeah.
So, you mentioned that anything we take out of context by our newsroom, is there any way to help try to prevent that more?
Well, I learned a lesson that day. You have to be open and upfront with the people who are dealing with your product, your work product. But the reality is Channel 4 owned that tape. That is their property. And if they think that's the best way to use it, they're going to use it that way. Now, there have been times when I have gotten into arguments that I've won. And I do argue a lot about the way I think things should be shot, what we should be leading with, And for the most part, I don't have that much conflict. I was concerned. I remember going into the news director and saying, really? That's what you pushed out? That's the only thing that was pushed out of that 10-minute interview while I was up there working? And they were like, yeah, well, the digital team, it has legs and people want to see that. And, there was so much controversy at that time, and there still is, about the outrageous things that he says, that they know that's what's, in a lot of ways, Donald Trump is a byproduct of us, of the media. Because when he started out in that first campaign, everyone thought it was a joke. Everyone, but he was good TV. He would say outrageous things. He would get people riled up in the way that he's still doing now. And it's hard to believe that here we are a week out and we're arguing about whether she's a communist or he's a fascist. And, it still is a game of clickbait. It is. And what did you see all day yesterday? You saw the comedian at Madison Square Garden calling Puerto Rico a garbage island. And it wasn't even Trump who said it, but it makes headlines and it grabs attention. And it wasn't just one outlet doing that, they all did it. If you go to the New York Times, if you go to the Washington Post, if you go to the networks, and if, Access Hollywood, they're all picking up on the same thing, because it's as if we have such a short attention span that we've got to feed people that kind of thing to get their interest, sadly. Did you have a question?
Is there some place we can go to see the entire interview?
We did have it up on our YouTube channel, but it's been 8 years. So I don't know if it would still be up there. But we did post the whole thing, because when I went back, I said, wait a minute, that we should let people hear what he said about his economy plan. About, at that time, there was some talk of border security, but not the way it is now, not the hot button issue that it became. But we did have it up. I know it was there for several years. I don't know if it's still up, because, they manage and handle that YouTube channel that the station runs. And we had it as well on our page for a while, but then that gets overburdened. There's too much stuff for people to click through. But it might be in an archive. I don't know. I don't know. I don't pay attention to that stuff that much. The one thing that has changed the most in this business since I started is technology. And it's so remarkable to me that they have reporters now who go out and can shoot a story on a camera. I was mentioning to her, my husband was a television photographer. We met in college. He used to carry around about 80 pounds of gear every day, with the big recorder thing on the side and the massive camera, and if he had a tripod with him and the battery bag. And so all of those guys have back and hip problems. He's had to have both of his hips replaced. And I'm sure it's because for 20 some years, he carried that much gear on his shoulder every day. And they all have problems. But now it's just fascinating to me that people can go out, they can shoot on these little cameras and edit themselves. And are you doing it back there? So that shoots broadcast quality stuff, doesn't it? Which is, you guys are so spoiled, so lucky. But at the same time, I've never learned to edit. I don't want to learn to edit. I don't want to do it. I don't care to do it. That's what they have other people for. But the people who can do it, who are gifted at it and can shoot and report and shoot their own stand-ups, you're going to be able to write your ticket. Because that's what they need. They need multimedia journalists more than ever before. And people who can write. I cannot emphasize this enough. Learn, if you're going to work with someone like me, learn grammar and learn to write a sentence that begins and ends in the same tense. I explained to a young producer last week the difference between that in which, an essential and a non-essential clause. And I'm telling her, okay, so in this sentence, that's an essential clause, so you're going to use the word that. Which is a non-essential, it's more descriptive, and I'm telling her all this stuff. She said, oh, okay, thank you. And then 2 scripts later, she did the same thing. So I just hope that you all learn grammar and writing skills. I can't overstate that. It will help you in more ways than you can imagine. And it also makes you sound like you know what you're talking about if you have proper grammar. I see you nodding. You must be an English teacher. Okay. Yeah, and my son's an attorney, and I was reading a brief that he was doing. He wanted me to, and I was going through it, and I pointed out some grammar errors, and he said, well, I wanted you to look at how I'm applying the law to the facts, because I'm an attorney too. And I said, I can't, I'm distracted by the grammar error you had here. I'm not looking at how you're applying the law. I'm looking at how you're writing a sentence. And you know what? You might get a judge that looks at it that way too. So I'll get off my high horse now. That's my pet peeve. And learn to spell. Well, are there any other questions?
Do you find that when you have to ask, certain questions like that, even after 10 minutes interviewing somebody, and stuff like that, it sort of makes it, like people try to place that you have a certain bias for asking that kind of question, or tarnishes your credibility at all, even though it doesn't have anything.
That's a great question. Because I do a political show, I'm asking people uncomfortable questions every week of my life. And what I find is, if I'm asking a conservative a tough question, I get emails saying, you are so liberal, you are so biased. And if I ask someone who's more progressive and liberal a really uncomfortable, tough question, I get emails that say, you are such a right-wing. So you just got to ask the questions. And that's one thing, we had a really good investigative reporter. She even got a better job and left our station. But when she first started working there, she pulled me aside and she said, wanted me to look at some of her stories, and because I reviewed stories and tapes for people. And she said, I know I should have asked him this, but I was so uncomfortable. You've got to get over that. You don't think of it as, oh, they're going to be mad at me, they're going to think I'm rude because I'm asking this. Your job is to make people sometimes uncomfortable. I think of it as I am asking the question that I think people need an answer to. Now, there might be fallout to it. There is a congressman who I think is Jim Jordan, your congressman up here? I asked him some very uncomfortable questions about the Strauss sex abuse scandal at Ohio State that I've done a lot of reporting on. And he has subsequently never agreed to do an interview with me. So we've been trying to get his district changed during the last gerrymandering, and he dipped down into our viewing area. He's in Morrow County, he's in part of Delaware County, he's down in our viewing area. So we wanted, before the election, to interview every member of Congress. Well, his office won't agree. They won't even take my producer's questions anymore. Well, I found out he was going to be speaking at a Merino event near us. So I said, give me a photographer. So I'm in the back of the room. And what they said when they announced this event was there would be what they call a gaggle at the end, where we could talk to Merino, and Frank Rose was there, and Jim Jordan was there, and we would be able to interview all of them. And they had a room set up for it. Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe it wasn't because I was there, but I noticed that a number of his people, when they came in, were whispering and pointing to me. And they canceled the gaggle. There was going to be no gaggle. I don't know if it was because of me. It may have been a time thing. I don't know. I just know it was canceled. So people are going up at the end of this event to talk to him as he's going out of the room. And I said to my photographer, let's go. And I took my mic and I walked up to the front of the room, and I was asking him election questions first, whether he could work with Kamala Harris, whether he, envisioned the next, if it's a Trump thing. And he, the entire time, is trying to walk away from me, and I just kept asking him questions. Well, I get to the Strauss case because it's now in federal court. And as I start asking him about Strauss, this woman comes up, and she clearly didn't think our mic could pick this stuff up, but we picked it up. She holds up a cell phone and says, I'm going to save you, to him, and pretends she's taking a cell phone picture with him, which she's not. We can see it on tape. She didn't take any picture. She's pretending to take a cell phone picture. So I wait while she's pretending to take the cell phone picture, and then I go right back to asking him questions just as he gets to the door. At that point, this woman shoves in between us and pushes me back against the wall and starts screaming in my face, don't touch me. I said, don't touch me. And I'm like, what? And meanwhile, he ducks out, she ducks out, leaves with him, and they close the door. She worked for him. But she's screaming, and so I'm like, my photographer was like, what the hell was that? I said, yeah, she shoved me. Well, the whole thing's on tape. It's like, there is a camera right here. Do you not see what you were doing? And so I put her on the air that night. I said, I don't know who this woman is, but here's how my interview ended today. This was not on my political bingo card. Take a look. And we played it. I never found out for sure. I thought the internet would do its job and we would find out who she was and what she did, but we never did. But you've got to be ready for that stuff. And you just got to keep asking. Keep asking. Your job, you don't want to be rude. You want to be respectful. But you have a right when someone is in elected office, when they have the confidence of the people, when they control the purse strings, when they are making decisions that affect their constituents, journalists have a right to ask the tough questions because people have the right to know the answers. Always. I just go back to the question. And it's kind of funny. In my other life, I have done media training for executives for when they find themselves in an uncomfortable position. And what I say to them, don't lie, don't try to avoid, don't prevaricate, but if you have a point that you want to get across, and smart people, smart politicians know this, get it in at the front. And most of them do that. You'll ask a question and they'll say, yeah, I'm going to get to that. But first, I want to make sure you know. Or if you look like at Carrie Lake was on CNN this week. Carrie Lake, who's running for Senate out west, who is in Arizona, who is a big Trump supporter and who also denies that she lost the last election when she ran for governor. The interviewer was saying to her, will you ever acknowledge that you lost that election? And her answer was, I'm looking forward. And this is what they're all saying now if you ask them about, did Donald Trump lose the election? I want to look forward. The interview went back to the question 5 times. She never answered it, but in her response, she was answering it. She was giving, and I think the interviewer got what she needed to get, that there will be denial at every stage from this person. Now, whether that bothers Arizona voters or does not, at least it's in front of them. And I think that's what's important about our job. Get it out there. Put it in front of people. Let them know. Half of the people might be angry with you, but that's what they pay us to do. And I take that really seriously. And I'm to the point, I'm 68 years old. There's nothing anybody can do to me at this point that will endanger my career. You know what? So if I lose my job tomorrow, okay, I'll retire. But that's just because I've been around a long time. I know for young journalists, this is very uncomfortable sometimes, and they get pushback. They might have people online threatening them, and you will get threats online, and you will, for the most part, people are really, really nice. But when it comes to politics, in this age of division and judgment, it's no longer, okay, you're my political rival, we're not going to agree on everything. It's you're my enemy. And as you saw, if you watched any of the rally last week at Madison Square Garden, they are now calling Kamala Harris the Antichrist. And of course, Donald Trump is now being called a Nazi. So it's no longer the age of diplomacy. And some of you are old enough to remember there are 2 politicians I always point to in this state who were so gifted at diplomacy and working across the aisle and compromise. One of them was a Republican, George Voinovich, and one of them was a Democrat, John Glenn. And they were the kinds of politicians that I kind of came of age covering. So this is all new territory for all of us, what we're living with right now. Okay? Thank you for having me. It's very nice. Thanks. Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks.